That sounds very common sense, but we have a tendency of not talking to each other. We are very comfortable in our own silos. But it is absolutely crucial to have all these inputs and all these three communities working together to tackle these complex problems that we are facing. Third, we are linking substantive issues. Let me give you an example. IPBES has so far produced 2 fundamental global thematic assessment reports. The first one was on pollination. The second on land degradation and restoration. And to many of us, it is very clear that change in land uses is a fundamental driver for the lack of wild pollinators. However, in our country level or subnational policy making, that link is less obvious. So it's absolutely critical to make very fundamental linkages to the different substantive issues. The fourth point is that these trialogues that we are implementing, they are not only talk shops, but they are very concrete action documents that arise from these discussions. And we have brought an example here, and please feel free to look at it. Our most recent regional trialogue was conducted in May in Nairobi in Kenya, and it brought together 5 countries from the Anglophone Africa. And I'm very pleased that my colleague from Zambia is here, since one of the practical policy examples is that the government of Zambia revised and updated its national voluntary land degradation neutrality target to include the issue of pollinators. And so please feel free to contact my colleague here. Maybe you can just raise your hand. In case of any questions about this, because I think this is absolutely crucial that these targets that we have heard so much about, also in the plenary, are not written in stone, but need to be updated and revised in order to remain relevant. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Anne. I'll now hand over to our last but not least final intervention of the session. Over to you, Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee Winowicki, and I'm a soil scientist based in Nairobi, Kenya, at World Agroforestry. And I had 3 observations that I'd like to share with you today. And one is about the call for farmer-centered approaches. 2 is the need for reliable and reproducible soil information, and this idea of human-centered communication products. So on the first, a real potential solution is this farmer-centered approach to more effectively combat desertification. And this includes approaches that allow farmers to innovate on her farm. For example, land restoration options that meet their social, economic, and environmental context. The second, and I was so pleased to hear the word reproducible by our colleague here, the first time I've actually heard that all week, the need for reliable and reproducible information on land and soil health that allows us to make evidence-informed decisions, for example, at the farm level, national level, or global level. And these data collection efforts can include systematic field surveys like what we do at eCraft, as well as crowdsourced data using user-friendly economic data collection apps combined with remote sensing. And the third, we've heard it over and over, better communication, but I would like to supply an option about how to communicate, and that's user-centered approach. And this is a participatory process to actually co-develop a tool for sharing, visualizing data that is tailored to the needs, but also the capacity of the user. And I think the collective passion and knowledge gathered here has put us on the right track for a positive and productive way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lee. Does anybody have any? We can have one round, maybe a maximum of 3 questions for our speakers on the stage. So not everybody will get a question at this point, but I might ask some of you to remain on the stage. So if you do have a question, hand up high. Okay, we've got one there, and one there. Okay, and we'll come back to you in a minute. Okay, so we've got, if we go over here first, and if you could say who you are and who your question is for.
I would like to stress the fact that recovery of the earth and recovery of the land is linked to the recovery of mankind as a whole. So a recovery of mankind is a regeneration process. It entails support and resources for people to understand and modify political, economic, social, ethical, cultural, educational, and biophysical dimensions of being in the world. So we must attempt to the paradigms of growth, power, wealth, work, and freedom embedded into political, technological, economical, social, and cultural education institutions. Changing asymmetric power relations and the resource distribution is mandatory. Inequalities cannot be solved by market-based solutions. It is mandatory to develop institutional capacity, judicial neutrality, information transparency, and the social spaces for civic engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Do any of the panelists have anything to respond to that in terms of the whole integrated nature of not just looking at the environment or the people, but thinking about the changes and the transformations that are needed?
Just a brief observation on that. I mean, this touches a bit on what I was mentioning about complexity, not just communicating complexity, but actually managing complexity, managing land as a complex, managing the food agriculture system as a complex system, for example. When you cited a number of elements of that just showcase what a challenge this is. I think a lot of this, the solutions were popularized in the ecosystem approach, which has been around for a couple of decades now. It was adopted by the Convention on Biological Diversity nearly 20 years ago, and then somehow forgotten or evolved into other things, but I still think it's there. And I think a lot of the interesting solutions on the ground, things that are going to scale, are really based on the ecosystem approach, in ecosystem-based adaptation now, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. We're talking now about nature-based solutions. And if you look at that, there's so many principles embedded in this approach that try to handle this complexity, making sure that solutions are very much bottom-up, addressing issues of rights and equity and so on, whilst also respecting the multiple values of ecosystems. So, and just to mention on that, since I can do a bit of gratuitous self-promotion, there will be a consultation on the nature-based solution standards that are being developed in several regions actually next week. And we're doing one here in Delhi on Saturday afternoon from 3 till 5 in the India Pavilion, just next door to here. So please come along and we can have a richer discussion about this.
Okay, thank you. Just very quick, because I want to take, well, I think we've probably only got time for one more question. So if you can just be quick, please, Anne.
I will try to speak as quickly as I can. Thank you so much for this intervention. I would like to pick up on your emphasis on civic engagement. I think it's absolutely important to remember that producing scientific evidence, unfortunately, is not enough to imply action. We also have to consider the political economy issues that are at play everywhere and sometimes prevent implementation based on the best scientific evidence for the most positive outcomes. And so I strongly agree with you that there is no other way to inflict change other than engage everybody, and particularly civic engagement. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anne. I think we've just got time for one more question, and then we're going to have a slight change in plan because some of our panelists for the next round have been called away to something else. I'll update you on that in a minute. Let's just have one more question from the gentleman over here. If you could say your name and where you're from,
my
please.
name is Chandra Vikash. My question is to the policy head from UNDP. You know, lots of ice is melting unexpectedly in Greenland. So let's break some ice on the contradictions in science and political economy. So I think there is a sheer helplessness that I don't think the crisis in science is about not having evidence, sufficient evidence. I think it's about how do we negotiate with the Trumps and the Bolsonaros and the Modi. So let's spell out and let's talk about the sovereignty of nation states and the and the lame duckness of United Nations. I mean, it's not a very healthy relationship of a father and a son or a mother and a son. It's about like just as a nation expects its provinces to fall in line or its local communities to fall in line, I don't think sovereignty is a non-negotiable at this juncture when we are at the brink of extinction. And I think we have to question hard, and plus UNDP itself is the, so I'll just keep it here, and it's a long conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you're right. It's a very long conversation, and I'm happy to continue it off this stage. I agree with you that the UN is a complex family. I think we all know what complex families entail. But I strongly believe that there's absolutely no other way than to collaborate together. Our world is faced today with such complex problems that collaboration and working together and seeking synergies between all of us, not only within the UN family, but everybody who is here, is not a choice, but it's mandatory. So we have to be able to complement each other in the best way possible, because I think one thing that is very clear is that we are just out of time to not do it. So all of us, and I think these conferences are a clear sign that all of us are ready to give our best to working together as efficiently as possible, because we don't have much more time to waste. I'm sorry?
Actually the golden opportunity to turn things around, because otherwise the nuclear meltdown would have killed us anyway.
I'm not entirely sure I would completely agree with you, but I think, yes, we have to turn the ship around before the damage we have done is so severe that, to recover from this is taking much more resources, much more time than we currently have. So yes, thank you very much. I take this as a very positive sign for all of us to collaborate together to get positive action going as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the questions. What I'm going to do is, this is going to be a surprise for the panelists who are here at the moment. Rather than send you back to your seats, I'm going to ask if you can stay there, because there's still questions that might be relevant for you coming from the audience. Is that okay for you all to stay? Yes? And I'm also wanting to invite our other panelists, Martin Dalamer from the University of Leeds, and then our national focal point from Kuwait, Ms. Abir Alabri. Could you come and join us on the stage, please? And you will see that once we have our new panel members on the stage, yeah, and if you need to go, you can go, we will have some empty seats. So what I'm going to do, if people have interventions they would like to make, I would like to open it up to the audience. We'll hear from Martin and we'll hear from Abir to begin with. But then I particularly encourage people that have an intervention that they'd like to make that they haven't had the chance to make, that isn't necessarily a question for the panelists, but is relevant to the science policy interface theme of today. So if we could just perhaps start with you, Martin. One of the things that has come up throughout the day is this emphasis for a need for economic information to help inform decision-making. Can you just summarize? Hannah's mentioned a little bit about the Economics of Land Degradation Initiative as a global initiative, but what's out there at a more local level and what is still needed? I think you need to hold the microphone up and maybe switch it on. Is that working?
Thank you, yes. I think that what we've heard today, and certainly what Hannah's...
Still not working. You have to hold it up really high as well.
So I think a lot of what we've heard today, and especially what Hannah's was able to summarise for us about the Economics of Land Degradation Initiative, is actually how much we do know about the economic importance of land. So we know that we need investment in land in order to secure the many benefits that land offers for human society, and those benefits are both economic and also extend into other aspects of human endeavour. And we also know that if we carry on with the business as usual, land will continue to degrade. And Hannah's summarised for us some of the really quite amazing and startling figures that we do know at a global level about the loss to the global economy from land degrading, and also the returns on investment that we can get by actually investing in reversing that degradation. So then there is this question about why are we not seeing more action? I think that comes down to the fact that land is very, very complex, and we need information that is relevant for those people who are managing land and for making decisions about land at the scales that are relevant for them. So whilst these global figures are very good for grabbing headlines and setting agendas, when it comes to individual farmers or individual policymakers needing to decide what to do, there's actually a real lack of understanding at those scales, taking into account all of the complexity that exists between farms and between regions. And I think that is some of the information that we do need to prioritise as we go forward.